Hello everybody, you tuned in to Cragcore. So today we are going to be taking a brief look into the timeline of events, and not all of them obviously, because off the top of my head here I'm not able to fully remember everything. This is ad lib, but basically we're just going to be taking a little brief look into what's happened over the last 18 months and why. Because I believe if we look at the stuff that's happened, we're able to see what it is that's brought us to this point, and then where we could be possibly going with regards to what's happening now. Because you've got to admit, certain things we've accepted in our society, and we've only accepted these things because of what was imposed upon us beforehand. So what that does is it kind of creates this question, doesn't it? Would we be where we are if not for this slow creep of rules, regulations, this totalitarianism? Well, I dare say no, we wouldn't be, because I don't think, just looking at it today, the date today is the 16th of October 2021, and what's being proposed at the minute is prick passports for jobs, and people are okay with it. But we wouldn't have been accepting of those restrictions. We wouldn't be accepting the government telling us we can't earn a living and that we're going to get the fucking sack, we're going to get fired from our jobs unless we accept the blackmail of taking a fucking double prick in the arm. Jesus, where are we? You've got to look at what it is that's brought us here, because at the minute we're faced with a situation, aren't we, where we keep arguing amongst ourselves as to why it may not be ethical. I've done videos on this, and it's not ethical, is it? But the thing is, people believe it is based on all the shit that's happened previously. Now, just going back a few steps, we wouldn't have accepted not going to work in the first place. Remember the first lockdown? I'm trying to go right back to the beginning here. Forgive me if I miss a few steps, and forgive me if I get it wrapped around my arse here, but these things can sometimes happen. I'm not a professional, just a guy on YouTube trying to put together something, and I suppose in the same respect trying to get it straight in my own head through these processes and these videos. Thank you for enjoying the journey with me. So, taking it back to the beginning, we accepted that we had to go into lockdown, didn't we? We accepted that we had to be shut in our homes. We were allowed out 1 hour a day. You remember that? An hour a day. It's like being in prison, man. Literally. People, the worst types of criminals that are locked up in jail. Well, people that have been locked up for the worst types of crimes. Sometimes they haven't done them. I say it's the worst types of criminals. It's just people that have been locked up for the worst types of crimes. Basically, are allowed out of their cells for exercise. They call it recreation. 1 hour a day. They call it 23-hour bang up or whatever it is. 23-hour lock up. This is where we were. Now, would we have accepted that based on the actual figures and the actual severity levels that we now know? Well, no, we wouldn't. But you see, what we're doing now is we're accepting stricter and stricter measures in spite of what it is we know now with regards to the severity levels and all of the numbers with regards to actual severe cases and deaths and stuff. So here we are, But back then, we wouldn't have accepted it unless there was something that came before it, like mass panic, mass fear. And I get it, man. You know, at the start, I've said this before, you can't blame people for being afraid of something that they don't know anything about, especially when, you know, things have been okay for the past few years. You know, for many years, things were just ticking by, weren't they? Yes, we knew there was war in Iraq. Yes, we knew there was conflict in other areas of the world, Syria, you know, the thing with Palestine. All of this has been going on. And yet, at the same time, we were just happy living our Western lives on a normal kind of vibe. And then all of a sudden, you get this ramp up of mass fear and panic. I mean, at that point, lots of people didn't trust the mainstream media. We were all kind of skeptical and dubious as to what the news was about, but there wasn't really any true evidence, was there, of the subterfuge that goes on and the fact that it's all propagated. Now, then, through that, you know, we were hit, weren't we, with all of these fucking numbers and Jesus, it was like a psychological fucking battering, wasn't it? Every time. You know, you got to look at things like 9/11, man. You remember it was on every single channel? Look at what's come from that. You've got to look at that and say, as horrendous as that was, perhaps that was practice. You know, perhaps that was practice for the big one. Because you got to look at this situation, you know, you take the towers out of the equation and the planes, and what have you got? You've got the same tactic. Everything's on telly all the time. You've got warnings everywhere. I mean, off the back of that, they brought in the terrorist bill, didn't they? The anti-terrorism stuff, national security stuff that came from that was, you know, surveillance. That was one of the steps in the agenda. Now, through accepting all of that surveillance, well, we're ready to accept other things, aren't we? You know, fast forward time 20 years, such a tragic event. Believe what you want to believe about that, you know, believe it was an inside job or if it was actually terrorists. The fact is, it was tragic. Thousands of people died on the actual day. Innocent people. And millions have died ever since because of it. So look at what was brought in because of it, you know. I mean, it was either planned or they didn't waste a crisis in order to inflict more totalitarian rule over the planet, you know. One more step towards the fucking future. The New World Order. Now, what have we got with this situation, you know, that's similar to that? Well, you've got the fucking fact that it was on every single TV channel. Absolutely everybody's been panicked. Nobody could escape it. And through all of that fear, through the fact that you couldn't escape the fear and the panic, no matter where you went, it was everywhere. You accepted then, you know, they got you engaged, didn't they? They engaged you in this, let's everybody watch the TV on a Friday night. Before you know it, they are predicting that there might be these kind of things happening, lockdowns. They've shut certain businesses down. They did it slowly. And then all of a sudden, we're locking you down. Nobody can go to work. But by this point, everybody's fucking terrified. So they're going, okay, fair enough. We're not going to work. Through all of this, you had the first signs of this fascistic virtuism. Because it was all about protecting the NHS. It was all about saving lives. You know, we were doing it for Queen and country. And what this created was this first initial implantation of this brainwashing that says give away freedoms to be a good person. And that's been the echo throughout all of this, hasn't it? That's been the fucking ethos. That's been the agenda, what they've done basically at every turn. It's been their work ethic, man. Give away your freedom to be a good person, and we're still there now. They haven't stopped with that. Remember, these people took away freedom in the first place, and although it wasn't necessarily freedom before, I mean, we can see that now, can't we? We can see that the world we lived in before certainly was not a free world, which is part of the good things that's happened because of all of this. It's been an awakening experience. We can't ever go back to normal. We can't ever go back to the way we were, because that means going back to a different type of slavery. At that point, it was like when David Icke said, you know, you're in a cell, you can see the bars. That's one type. But the other type is entirely different, where you're in a cell but you can't see the bars and you think you're free. And that's where we were. And you know what? David Icke was right, man. He was on the fucking button with that one. He was absolutely right. And that's where we were. And we can't go back there. We can't. We shouldn't want to go back to normal. We should want things to change at this point. Trying to drag things back, we don't need that. You know, why do you want to be back to being blind to your enslavement again? But you see, moving forward, we've got to expose ourselves. We've got to accept. Rather than trying to bury our head in the sand and go along with it, you're left with a choice. And it's a choice of whether or not you just want to fucking give in and take the next step of abject and ultimate fucking totalitarian rule and crushing authoritarianism over your life. Or do you want to move forward, expose yourself to all that tyranny, accept that it's been going on, and try and move through it and move out of it? Because, you know, I choose the latter, obviously, because I'm doing this. But what was the next step? You know, we accepted our lockdowns. At some point throughout the lockdown, I think a lot of people realised, actually, once, you know, a month had gone by, actually, you know, this isn't really what we thought it was, because the government start putting out little bits of information like deaths for any reason within a 28-day period of being tested and having it positive and stuff like that. And that was the, you know, where people started to say, well, hold on a fucking minute here, you know, this isn't necessarily right, you know, because that's not right. That is telling you that they are adding up all these deaths that aren't from this thing, but they're counting it as from this thing to justify what it is they're doing. And that's what that is. And they told you they were doing it. They were honest about that. And people decided, they chose to not look at that. And they chose to ridicule and criminalize people that chose to point it out. And that came, in my opinion, from that first initial, you are irresponsible if you don't want to give your freedom away. That first seeding of the brainwashing, you know, the fascistic virtuism. But what happened next? I mean, we came out of that first lockdown. It was hard, wasn't it? It was very, very hard. It was new. It was very hard. But you see, what that did was, in my opinion, it took away an awful lot of people's fire. You know, it got rid of their fire somewhat, didn't it? After that, people were more readily acceptable to, more ready to accept the things that were going to then be imposed upon them. Because then you get told, well, if you don't want another lockdown, now you've got to do this. So again, it's threats again, isn't it? It's all threats. So we accepted muzzling ourselves, being stopped at the doors of the supermarket by people that had been deputised and were wearing stab vests and looking like some form of fucking, you know, Gestapo type fucking individuals, these militant people that you'd said hello to previously as you've walked into the supermarkets and stuff and into the shops that you were going into. You'd said hello to these. If you go there regularly, they were security guards. They were there to protect you, and then all of a sudden they're attacking you at the door and saying, you know, well, we need proof that you don't have to do this, even though it quite clearly said on the government website that you didn't need proof. And they were forcing you to do this and humiliating and shaming you because they'd been told by their CEOs, they'd been told, you know, by their managers that this is what they had to do. I got stopped at the door, obviously, of course I did. And I said, I don't need to show any proof. And he said, well, yeah, you do. I said, look, you don't. But he still forced me to go on the internet and show him this thing on the government website, which was an absolutely fucking pointless thing. Because it makes no difference, man. They have to see this thing. But again, why would somebody be telling their staff, you've got to force people to show you this thing that makes no difference? Because anybody can say that they are exempt. Because you don't have to give proof of any exemption, and you don't have to give proof once you get to the shop. It says that, but yet they're still forcing you to do it, which, again, it reeks of compliance, doesn't it? It reeks of the need for compliance over common sense. So we accepted that, didn't we? And where are we now? Because we've been accepting that for some time now, and that's been the argument, mask or no mask. And then what came from that, though? You know, if you don't want to have to go back to wearing masks and lockdowns, well, then you've got to take this prick in the arm. You know, you've got to take the double prick. But because there's been pushback, you know, a lot of people have accepted it because they're terrified of having to go back. Again, it's more threats, isn't it? It's more blackmail. Remember, there are just as many pieces of information and evidence out there to prove that these things actually don't really work. Actually, all of these things serve to lower the body's natural immune system's capability of fighting viruses. If you constantly use, you know, what does the immune system need? It needs to be exposed to things in order to learn about it so it can protect you from it in the future. That is how the immune system works. We've all got one. We've had one since birth. We've all been okay, right? Every now and then you need a little jab here and there. I get it. People feel as though they need to against certain diseases like hepatitis and stuff like that. I get it. You know, people are afraid. There are certain things that the body can't fight against. But viruses are one of the things that the body can fight against. You know, this isn't a blood-borne pathogen, is it? This is a virus. So your body's natural immune system is more than equipped. You know, that's what its purpose is. Its purpose is to learn how to fight these things naturally. So if you use hand sanitizer all the time, what are you doing? You're taking away all those bacteria from your hands that you would normally be coming into contact with, therefore taking away from the immune system its ability to learn from those bacteria. So therefore you are weakening the immune system, because now it doesn't know how to deal against these bacteria. Same thing with masks. You know, the particles of the virus spores are much smaller than other things like hay fever, like pollen spores and stuff like this. So that goes to show that if you can still get hay fever through these things, look it up, man. It's all on the internet. Have a look at the size of different particles and stuff. You can find that out. Now, if you stay socially distanced, anti-socially distanced from people, what does that do? Well, it stops you coming into contact with bacteria from other people, where they've been, what they've come into contact with. And what does it do? Again, it lessens the immune system's capability to fight against bacteria, because now it's no longer coming into contact with them on a regular basis. So it isn't learning. It's a learning computer. It has to come into contact with things in order to learn from it. If you rob it of that, well, then when it is coming into contact with things, it drops the ball, doesn't it? And it doesn't know how to deal with it. So ultimately, everything that you've been told to do is actually going against health, because it's taking away your body's natural ability, your natural capability. It's taking away your human ability to deal with viruses. But, you know, you're being told the only way to get out of this is to take this double prick. And if you want to remain working, if you don't want to be sacked, again, more blackmail, more threats, then ultimately what you have to do is take this double prick. And, you know, people are saying, you know, that there are... I mean, that's wrong, isn't it? That's blackmail. Let's just look at it. That is blackmail, and it is wrong. So, you know, they haven't really got the right to do this. But the trouble is, public opinion, the more and more people do it, the more accepted it is within society. Therefore, there's no pushback from society. So now we're getting to the present day. And people say, well, there's all these different things to do with the double prick. People are saying there's microchips in it and all sorts. Now, that in itself, if anybody's looked into nanotechnology, it's a possibility. It's readily fucking possible, considering how small they can make things nowadays. But you see, where could this be leading us? Because that's what they're saying, isn't it? That this is leading us into a microchipped society, and that there are microchips in this. Well, I think that maybe the microchip perhaps isn't in the prick itself, but it's the delivery system for it nonetheless, theoretically. You know, analytically, it's the delivery system for it, because once they've got you to accept this stage, just like they've got you to accept other things based on the previous stages, they will be able, therefore, to get you to accept a microchip because of the stages we're going through now, because of the acceptance that you're having right now for the things that you're being told to do. So as soon as you accept that it's okay for somebody to tell you to have a double prick to go to work, well, ultimately then, what does that bring in? It brings in the need for ways to prove it. And it brings in the need because obviously with work comes jobs, because, you know, work it's a job, isn't it? And everybody then uses what they, you know, earn, which is money from working, to go and spend it with other people that are at work in their jobs. So as soon as you've created a system in society where people have to adhere to this rule, you've got to take this in order to actually go about your daily life and earn a living and survive, well, ultimately then what happens is people don't want to have to rely on a phone app all the time, do they? Because ultimately what that does is it's inconvenient. So then they may well say at that point, well, we're doing away with the mobile phone app, and now we're just going to give you a microchip instead. And you see, all of this is only possible because you accepted the steps that came before it, which is where we are now. Now, I don't know, man. You can look at it like that. You can say I'm chatting a load of bollocks. I'm sure there are plenty of people on here that believe I am. But you see, the truth of the matter is this. We are here today in this situation where we are having our freedoms revoked, or at least given back under condition, which isn't free at all. But you see, we weren't free in the first place. They want us to go back to being enslaved, but they want us to agree to it now. Before they had us enslaved subconsciously, we were doing it thinking we were free, but now they want us to fully submit and give away our freedom so they can do whatever they want. Because before, I'm sure, there were certain boundaries and certain things that they weren't able to do because it would kind of make us think, holy shit, this isn't right. This isn't what we want. But if they can get you to consciously want enslavement, look at what you had before. It wasn't free, but you can have it back if you want it. But now you have to truly submit. And you see, that's the cost. They want you to get on your knees and beg to be a slave again. And that at that point will ultimately give them complete and utter power because you've asked for it. You want it. And we wouldn't be in this situation if not for the steps that we've taken up to this point. So you've got to then look at what the steps that we're taking now and how that will affect the potential future. On that note, I'm going to say this isn't all bad, because we wouldn't be in this state of realization if not for the unveiling of this plan. We wouldn't be in the situation where en masse people are talking about this. I used to go about my daily life knowing that I was part of a fucking enslaved world. Never did anything about it. But you see now, the call to arms is basically what's happening now. People have been forced to mobilise and forced to speak out and say something. And you see, that's good. Because now people are talking about it. Now people are shedding light on it. And unless you look into the darkness, man, unless you expose yourself to the bad shit, you aren't able to fight it. Because if you're stood in a dark room and, you know, somebody's just going to punch you in the face, you can't see them, you need to actually shine a light on them so you can actually have the ability to dodge or block that punch. So, it's not all bad. So long as we make the right choice and we say no to this and we move forward into this new world, demanding positivity, demanding actual liberty, demanding actual democracy, rather than being so desperate to go back to the way it was before because it was easier. It's an old glove, isn't it? It's the old comfort blanket. Keeps you warm. You don't have to worry about the world because everything's being taken care of. At the end of the day, we can come out of this positively, is what I'm saying. And please, you know, take on board what it is I've said. Take a look at the situation and make your own mind up. But do it critically, you know, have a look properly with an open eye. And by an open eye, I mean an open third eye. So have a good overview and, you know, just give it some thought. And on that note, I'm going to wish love and peace to all things everywhere. This is Cragcore, and I am signing off. Peace.